Welcome to the Dunamis EQ podcast. Thank you for listening. We are here to empower people through the stories of great leaders, leaders who lead with emotional intelligence. I'm Tolly, your host, and today I'm joined by Steve Ware. Thank you so much for joining, Steve.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So Steve and I go back not quite 20 years, but probably getting towards 20 years. So when I lived down south, I used to play for this basketball team called the Portsmouth Fury. We had a lot of great seasons together, and Steve was one of the captains of the team at the time. Him and Andy were both kind of co-captains. I never really understood the dynamic, but they both led the team together very well. And Steve has recently made the transition from working in IT at IBM over to working into wellness and well-being. So, Steve, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, what you're currently doing at the moment.
Sure. So I guess the first thing to say to Lou is that I never set out to do this. So I'm finding myself talking about this new career, right, which came when I was 46, so coming up 2.5 years ago.
Wow.
And I never set out to do it. So I've started describing myself as the world's least likely mindfulness teacher.
Why least likely?
Well, because I never woke up and thought I want to teach people mindfulness. It's like, if I tell you the story, so I joined IBM when I was a kid. I joined when I was 18 and worked for them forever. And I did a lot of different technical jobs and it was all great. But after about 20 years, I started burning out. The pressure of the job just got heavy. And I started, probably for the first time in my life, I slept badly, really badly. I was used to just being a great sleeper. I'd go to bed and sleep like a baby and it was all good. My anxiety levels were higher. I had no way of switching my mind off. And so I had this kind of really uncomfortable situation where I thought, I feel stressed, I feel anxious, my sleep's bad. And I don't really know what to do about it, honestly. And I felt like I was in a very macho world. I mean, you and I played basketball together.
Yeah.
That's fairly macho. I was in a huge corporate, big American company that's
very macho.
Macho, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of demands on people and you got a lot of responsibilities, clients and stuff. And so I thought I need something. I was always shying away from kind of medication if I could, but I didn't really know what would help me. And somebody one day said to me, "Why don't you try mindfulness?" I'm like, I read the science on it. It's meant to be amazing for stress reduction and sleep and stuff. And I won't say the words. So I know this is a family show. I won't say the words I said.
Yeah.
I told them exactly where they put their books and their phones and their mindfulness apps.
Right.
Because it just didn't fit for me. I didn't think it did. It felt new age. It felt a waste of time. It felt like nothing. I didn't know what meditation was. I didn't know what mindfulness was, but I had strong opinions about them. That's interesting in itself, right?
Yeah.
A lot of time in life, we've got strong opinions about something. We've really never experienced them and we really know nothing about them, but we have...
Where do you think those came from? Those strong opinions?
I think, yeah, it's a good question. I think, I would describe myself as a typical, kind of, I don't know if big head's the right word, but kind of a Westerner.
Okay.
And you see all these Eastern things, these Eastern philosophies and yoga and mindfulness and acupuncture and Tai Chi and all these things. And the kind of machismo, the macho Western responses are, that's all a load of rubbish. That don't do anything. We do it better in the West, and we've got proper medicine here. And we've got, and I think I just inherited that as I grew up, and But there was also made me feel weak. It made me feel vulnerable.
That's interesting. Yeah,
the thought of me thinking, like I wasn't going to burst into basketball and say, "Hey guys, I'm meditating. Anyone else want to do it?" But ironically, right? If you look it up, Phil Jackson.
Yeah, like one of the winningest coaches ever. Yeah. That's his thing.
Even now, LeBron James is he's partnered with the app Calm, so it's massively in sport now. But we're going back 10 years now. So Phil Jackson had done it, but it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. So anyway, so I had this. So somebody said, "Why don't you try mindfulness?" I said, "Hell no." But I went home and I thought maybe there's something in it. Maybe my kind of narrow-minded, closed, opinionated Western brain was wrong sometimes, and I thought I'm going to try it, but I'm going to try in secret.
Okay.
Of my wife, I didn't tell anyone else. Didn't tell. And
so did you tell your wife, or you didn't tell your wife?
Of my wife.
You told your wife. Okay.
Of my wife. didn't tell any friends.
Okay.
Didn't tell any work colleagues.
Okay.
And all I did, I downloaded Headspace, the app. Everyone's probably heard of Headspace. One of the first apps. The reason I downloaded that is because one of my family members was working with Andy Puddicombe in London.
Okay.
He was in London 10 years ago before he moved to LA. Headspace was in its infancy, and she just kind of knew of him and had done some stuff with him and thought he was really good. So she said, why don't you download Headspace? It's free for 10 days. And I thought, what the hell is free for 10 days?
Give it a try.
Yeah, so I tried it, and some people think the end of this story is going to be, I tried it and it was just amazing. Every day since has just been heaven and my life perfect now. It wasn't that. It was, but there was something there. There was the tiniest feeling of peace.
Wow. What did that feel like after so long of not having that?
Oh, it felt like finding water in a drought.
Wow.
Because I never thought I'd find it again. I felt my mind's so busy and hectic now, and life's only going to get more complicated. Like, you get old, you get more responsibilities. The bills never stop.
No, definitely not.
And if you're a grown adult, the way you are by stressing out and worrying about everything. And that was huge. It sent shivers down my spine. I can remember reading one of my favorite mindfulness books, the book on which a lot of the stuff I teach is based. I can remember reading it in the garden just here and in the summer months, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up because I thought, this is me. Like, not only is this me, but this is describing a way out potentially. Massively. Like, that was. I started, I felt a little bit less overwhelmed, I'd say. I felt a little bit less anxious. I slept a tiny bit better. There were micro improvements, but they were there. I thought they were there. And this piqued my interest. I thought, okay, I've got to.
There's something in this.
I discovered the equivalent for my mind that I do for the gym. I was pretty good at eating and working out.
You've always been in shape. You've always been in very good shape.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I tried to, but I was doing nothing for my mind, right? That's
It's fascinating.
The big mission. So, so I started devouring these podcasts, reading all these books, still didn't tell a soul. And here's where it gets a bit interesting. People in the office started to notice a change in me.
Wow.
Which was really interesting because I hadn't told them, honestly. And they said, what are you doing? Something's changed, you're a bit calmer, you're a bit less reactive, a bit less angry. And they said, what are you eating? And I said, it's not the organic blueberries. So I was embarrassed to say it, but I said, I started meditating, I started practicing mindfulness. And their reaction was, can you teach us?
Wow.
Straight away. They said, we need this, we're sleeping badly, we're stressed. And those 4 words did change my life because although I had to say no at that point, because I knew teaching mindfulness wasn't something you could just do on a whim. I'd studied it enough to know there was a real depth to this. There was a real power to this. You had to honor this stuff. And so I politely declined them, but I did go home and I thought, you know what? There's no greater gift I could give these people. Like, finding a bit more peace in this crazy world is the best thing I can give them, my colleagues. So it did plant a seed that grew. And I can remember literally coming home one day from work and I Googled, where's the best place to learn how to teach mindfulness in business? Because that was all I was interested in then is could I teach my colleagues and what would that look like? I still didn't want to be a proper teacher. Oxford University came up, so I thought, all right, I'll go there. And I signed up to a bunch of courses and trained there for a few years. And specifically learning to teach mindfulness in business. And it's got a specific business application. It's different. Okay. It's very different to the clinical version or the kind of, even the public version to a point. So long story short, I trained to teach that, and then I bought an 8-week program into IBM because I thought that was what was missing, right? And here's the big mistake businesses make when it comes to mindfulness. And it's best encapsulated with a phrase about fitness. So the phrase is, nobody ever got fit by listening to a talk on fitness. And it's true with mindfulness, right? If you get the mindfulness guy or girl in on a Friday afternoon at 3:00, they could give the best keynote you've ever heard. And it could be full of the most compelling science and their testimonials and they've worked with big clients. They can tick all the boxes. That is not going to transform your organization through mindfulness.
No. It'd be like temporary motivation. People will be like, oh, that's really, really cool. And then next week, it's gone.
Back to default. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
So I was saying to the senior people at IBM, we've got to do something differently. And the thing we've got to do differently is we've got to take people on a proper program. We've got to let them shift from knowing the concepts of mindfulness to directly experiencing them. And when you do that, you know what mindfulness means to you and whether it's something you want to do and whether it's something you don't want to do. So long story short, I did bring this 8-week program in, and it was insanely successful to them. I don't take personal credit for that. I facilitated the course, but the people did the work. But literally the first course I taught, people were saying things like, one lady said, I've been off work sick long term, and I'm coming back ahead of time as a direct result of your course. And I was like, wow. This is like the initial feedback. There's one other guy who had, these are all people that have given me that in the front of me saying this. Another guy said he had pre-hypertension, so high blood pressure for a decade. He said it came back to normal for the first time in the 8 weeks we were together.
That's amazing.
And his doctor was like,
what are you doing?
Yeah, which disappointed me in itself. That's a whole separate conversation. I was thinking, a doctor's really that closed down to the fact that if you kind of look after your body and mind, your blood pressure can come down. But anyway, and there was one other lady I remember in particular, quite senior in HR and IBM. And she said, this has been life-changing for me and my family. She said, this like ripples out. If I'm a better person, if I'm a better leader, if I'm more emotionally intelligent, if I'm more self-aware, that ripples out at work and it ripples
everywhere,
at home.
Everywhere.
So it's very selfless work.
Agreed. So I did have a question actually about, if we rewind a little bit, and this is just a small question, but you said about you told your wife, but you didn't tell anybody else. What was that moment like when you were going to tell your wife? Like, were you scared about telling her? Were you like, what were you thinking when you were going to tell her, and how did she respond?
Yeah, I wasn't scared at all because she's very open to all this kind of stuff.
Okay. Was it kind of like you're finally giving in to the stuff she's been telling you for a long time?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, yeah, she's definitely someone that would support this. She wouldn't be like, oh, you're crazy, Les.
Yeah.
Rubbish. So that was a very easy conversation.
Yeah. That's cool. So you mentioned briefly emotional intelligence. So what I want to ask is, what does emotional intelligence mean to you? Like, how would you define it? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I would link emotional intelligence directly and kind of inextricably with self-awareness.
Okay.
So, and we need to distinguish between intelligence and wisdom, I think, as well, if we're going to come.
Okay, talk to me. Tell me more.
Well, for me, intelligence is great, is wonderful, is an incredible benefit of the human mind, but it's not always infused with wisdom.
Okay, so what's the difference for you between intelligence and wisdom? Like, if you had to define the two, how would you define them?
I guess in the simplest way, I'd say intelligence is splitting the atom.
Okay.
And then what happens next
is wisdom.
Wisdom is not then creating the atom bomb.
But
intelligence is creating the atom bomb.
Yes.
It takes incredible genius to build that thing. I mean, phenomenal. That's huge intelligence, but it's not wisdom. Wisdom for me is things that serve the people and this planet and do good rather than just insanely intelligent, but could be used for destruction and ripping people off or whatever. Yeah. There's often no wisdom infused there, and I think if you're lacking the wisdom part, then you do something like split the atom and then create the atom bomb with it, rather than using the wisdom of what's really going to serve you and everybody else. That's kind of the ultimate thing on this planet that we're living on, right? Otherwise, we're all going to destroy it. I mean. We've got the tools to destroy it. And right back in the day, if you had a disagreement with someone, you'd be using bows and arrows and primitive things. Whereas now you can press buttons and drop huge bombs But I think you were going to say I think I was defining emotional intelligence in business, wasn't I? And for me, there's a strong overlap between emotional intelligence and self-awareness.
Okay.
So the most emotionally intelligent leaders I see that I've been around, it all starts with self-awareness. It starts with awareness of their emotions. It starts with awareness of their leadership style. It starts with enough awareness of other people that they've developed empathy. They can really tune into people. They can really walk alongside them rather than just in front of them when they're leading. And everything comes back to self-awareness, because if you have no self-awareness, you literally are the thoughts in your head. You follow those thoughts like they're you. If you have no self-awareness, there's no separation between anything that happens in your thoughts and actions and anything else. And so I think what I learned, I guess the biggest thing I've learned when I've practiced mindfulness, is this incredible thing called self-awareness, which it sounds like a stupid thing, but it's just so practically helpful.
Yeah.
Let me give you a real life example. Your spouse, your other half, your best friend, whoever, your parents, they push your buttons, right? And you're about to say something or do something.
Yeah.
And there's this tiny gap where you see this huge surge of anger coming, and you see the thought in your head that says, I'm going to say this. I'm going to do this. And it's like the guy that grabs you on the shoulder and says, hey, Talib, wait just a second.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Do you really want to say that, man? Do you really want to do that? Do you really want to follow that impulse? And so the self-awareness just gives you the ability to see what's going on in your mind, which is life-changing.
I like that. It's almost like emotional intelligence is the ability to see. That's really, really profound, because the more that you can see and do something about it, the better your responses are going to be. And I think that's what you're trying to say with emotional intelligence and wisdom. We don't just want intelligence where we know that something's going to happen if we're not then going to act wisely about what we can see about to happen. And I think that's the big difference, I think, from if I understood right what you're trying to say.
Absolutely. And I describe it as the difference between reacting and responding. So habitually we react.
Yeah.
Whereas if we respond is more likely to be infused with a bit of wisdom, where we take a step. Okay, I see this now. The greatest gift you can learn in life, I honestly believe this. The greatest gift you can give yourself in life is to go from being used by your mind to using your mind.
100%.
And when you can do that, that requires self-awareness. That requires a lot of practice. It requires a lot of mistakes. But if you can start to do this, if these things, mindfulness, you could maybe use other things. People use yoga, and but if you can find some way of not being a slave to your mind, then the world changes completely.
It puts you way more in control.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we don't see the world as it is, but as we are.
Yes.
And with our thoughts, we shape the world, right? Pick whatever mantra you want. But our mind's constantly interpreting and constantly narrating and constantly telling us things that may or may not be true. And if you never go from looking through your mind to at your mind and see what's happening in there and have some self-awareness of it, then it's like you're walking blindfolded. You're just an automatic pilot, and you just drift and go, keep repeating the same things, keep believing the same things. You're not open to other people's points of view because you think you're right all the time. It's a pretty, and then, that as a leader, that's terrible as a leader, right? Because we want leaders who are open to being corrected or challenged, or are going to give us empathy, are going to, make good decisions because they're aware of everything and are not driven by their emotion. They're driven by facts and a kind of calm head.
And I think there's one part to be self-aware, but then there's also part of it being aware of others. And that's some of the stuff that you're touching on now, is that like I can be totally aware of how I'm receiving something, but am I also aware of how I'm impacting others or how situations are impacting others? And do I actually know how to get to the best outcome, because I can take those things into consideration and be mindful of the various moving parts as a leader to understand, okay, what's the best way to get us through this?
Absolutely. And the other thing that always makes me smile, I'm a huge dog fan, and I've watched a ton of. There's a guy in the US. Some people probably heard him. He's called Cesar Millan. He's one of the probably most famous dog trainers in the US. But one of the phrases he said that I picked up on, he said, "Humans are the only species that will follow an unstable pack leader."
Wow.
Humans are the only species that will do that. A dog will not be ruled by a pack leader that's
really
fearing into them. Yeah, they won't. It's a nervous energy. It's a bad energy. They don't like the frequency of it. A dog will will either fight that or run away. It will not. So a dog won't follow unstable pack leadership. Humans will, because humans.
Why do humans do that?
Well, we can be manipulated,
Interesting.
right? I think it all comes down to, a lot of it comes down to fear. I think our fear of, I don't know, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to, or rejection, or there's a whole bunch of stuff. We can be manipulated way more easy than a dog, which is living really based on instinct, not emotion. And that instinct, not emotion, is a very pure state to be in. And
that's huge. Because we're also not taught to follow our instinct, to trust your gut. We're not taught that. And I think, to be honest, part of it is education in some ways teaches you to follow what you've been taught and what you know, as opposed to your instinct and what kind of kept us alive through all the years.
Totally. My biggest example of that is when I lost my job. So I've been made me redundant in 2020 during COVID. And they didn't give me a bunch of money. They gave me £12,000 for 12 years service, which,
How? How is that possible?
Statutory minimum is as possible, the law.
Wow.
So they gave me this money, right? And I literally, that was the first head v heart decision I ever made, ever. Age 46, and I sat with it. And I was more self-aware. I was more in touch. This may sound a bit woo to some people, but I was more in touch with my body, right? And even if we keep this mainstream science, the mind and body are
they're very linked.
Totally linked, right? And I would sit. I remember, so I lost my job, and I would sit, and my wife lost her job as well. So, but I would sit and I would think, what do I really want to do with the rest of my life now? And the thought, if I just allowed the thought to come in when I was quiet, when my mind was fairly still, I'd allow the thought to come in. Do I want to go back into corporate? Do I want to do the thing I've done for the past almost 30 years? Honestly, it sounds dramatic. It honestly made me feel a bit nauseous.
Wow. I
could feel it in my stomach. I could feel my body tensing. I could feel this contraction. I could feel my jaw tightening. I could feel my shoulders hunching. When I thought, well, what about teaching mindfulness? You've been doing this in my brain for a couple of years. You love it. You love helping people. There was a fear there, but it was an excited fear, right? And and this is an important point because the fear of you getting on a roller coaster, if you love roller coasters, and the fear of you going out and presenting in front of 10,000 people on a huge stage, if you hate doing that, physiologically, those two things are pretty similar.
Right.
But it's the story in our head that makes the difference, right? One is exciting. 100%. I want to get on. I want to get this buzz.
It's adventure.
And one is, this is a fake monkey. So I don't know what I'm doing. Say someone questioned me out, whatever. And I had the latter fear. I had this fear of, I don't know how to run a business. I've been working in a business. I've never run a business. I'm not a businessman. I know how to teach mindfulness. I've got a lot of experience in corporate, and it'll probably translate outside of IBM. But there were a lot of unknowns, and the risk-averse me would have absolutely run a mile from that. But there was something I'm so passionate about this. There was something so powerful driving me that I could lean into that fear and see that it was kind of an excited fear. It was kind of, I really want to do this. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know what's going to happen, but I've got to try it. I can't be on my deathbed thinking, no, I should have tried.
I wish I had done it. Yeah.
Right.
Agreed. And so one of the things you mentioned was that, because when I knew you, you were always like the calming head for the basketball team. Like when things would get crazy, you were the guy that was like, we need to chill out, right? In some choice language sometimes, but you were like, we all need to chill out, right? And so obviously I went away to university, and it sounds like some of this stuff happened, after I'd left. So what I'm intrigued in is like, did you have any emotional intelligence training or leadership training up until that point? Or was this really the first time that you were engaging with things like emotional intelligence, leadership, mindfulness? Was this kind of your real first experience of that?
Yeah, this was my first proper experience of it.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say I was the calm guy at basketball, right? Because I spent my whole life giving off that image of, everyone knows about the duck, right? The duck's gliding on the thunder.
Yeah.
The feet going like crazy. And that's probably not helped me. People have think Stevie's super calm. And I can fake it a bit. Underneath, there wasn't a sense of stillness.
So there wasn't the actual substance there.
No.
Okay. Wow.
And that's why I gravitated to this so much, because I thought, if I'm going to do I consider myself a leader? I guess I do in some ways. I'm constantly, I mean, there are different definitions of leader, I guess, right? You can be a leader in a corporate, you can be a leader on a basketball team, you can lead people through facilitation at workshops and things like that. So I don't have a rigid definition of leader, and I think we all lead in certain ways or certain parts of our life. But yeah, I hadn't, up to that point, I hadn't really explored any of this. And if I hadn't suffered in my life, I wouldn't have explored any of this. I'm actually, it sounds huge irony to say it. I'm very grateful for all the tough times. They're the ones that push you to grow. They're the ones that grow.
Absolutely.
And take you out of your comfort zone, kicking and screaming. But that's what you develop.
Absolutely.
That's where you'll learn your self-awareness. That's where you'll have the patience to practice, because you're fed up of feeling bad. You're fed up of not sleeping. You're fed up of feeling anxious all the time.
It's so true. And I think back to what you said about the definition of leadership. So a big thing for this podcast is that everybody is a leader, because it starts with, you have to lead yourself, right? Yeah. You have to lead yourself through life before you even lead other people. But then there's also the fact of, there's always going to be people that are ahead of you. There's always going to be people that are behind you. Even if you just think about an age, you know, like I have a niece, you know, my wife's sister's daughter, and she's not even my blood niece, but I know that she watches me and how I do things, right? And I'm leading myself, and I'm also leading her, whether I like it or not. You know, so for us, like, everything is about, like, leadership starts with yourself. So the better you can lead yourself, the better you can be for other people. Absolutely. And I think that what you said about, you know, the trials that you go through and the hard times, like, if you allow them to, they will make you so much stronger, because it's that time under tension, you know, like with weights, like there is an element of time under tension. Obviously you can't have too much tension or you snap, right? But there is something about, if in that you can try and look at it for, okay, what can I learn? How can I grow? You know, how can I use this momentum that's coming against me for a positive thing? I think that's, you know, that's a common theme that we hear a lot of people who say that moment really, really sucked. You know, it was horrible, but this is how I was able to use that to become stronger. And I think it's such a powerful thing.
That's huge. And you got to be careful when you ask that question, because I sometimes when I see people going through something big, suffering with something big, and I start to see them coming out the other side, I start to see that it forces them to change or to go on a mindfulness course or whatever it is. And I'm very tempted very quickly to say, are you grateful that there's...
Yeah. It's like too early. Yeah.
Give it a year, then I'll...
Yeah. Give me time to get it really in the rearview mirror, you know?
Exactly, yeah. Back to your news, like, you know, that completely makes sense. And the mistake I made when I first learned this stuff, I thought, oh, this is amazing. Like, this is the biggest. I've got to tell everybody. I've got to tell my mates. I've got to tell my parents. My dad, he gets so much from this. And I went there and I bought him the book, and then I was listening to one of the greatest mindfulness teachers in the world, and he said, the next time you feel like telling someone they should be doing a mindfulness course or meditating, he said, just go and meditate yourself.
Wow.
Because if you embody this stuff yourself, we're back to people noticing it.
Yes. Yes, exactly. You didn't tell them. No.
And I didn't want to tell them. I was doing it for me at that point. I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to run a course. I didn't want to do anything. They're the ones that said, hang on, something's happened here and we want to be a part of it. And so your niece is absolutely, you know, especially young kids or, you know, dogs, and any sort of, there's quite a lot of similarity, I think, between young kids, especially pre-verbal kids and dogs. And
explain that a little bit more.
I think, you know, well, what's amazing about a dog is a dog has no sense of self. They don't judge you. They don't look at you and say, I hate your glasses. You know, you're losing your hair. You put on some weight since last year. They don't walk past a shop window and look at themselves and go, God, I look so much better than last year, and I'm really happy compared to that other dog. So there's no sense of self. They don't carry this burden of self, which is hugely liberating. There's no embarrassment. There's no fear. There's no fear of death. And kids are like that up to a certain point, right? Look at a baby. What's a baby doing? It's just wide-eyed, looking around. It's not judging you. It's got no thoughts about you at all. Hasn't internalized this sense of self. I am called this. I am X years old. I work here. I do this. All these things that come and go, by the way, that aren't really who we are in our essence, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, so when you're point I guess I want to make is when you're around dogs or young kids, it's very liberating for people because they meet the kids or the dogs where they are,
where they're at,
and that's a state of very little mind, very little thinking. You don't need to think to be with your dog and to stroke her and see her tail wag, and it'd be a beautiful experience. You don't think to hold the baby and hear her laughing. And so that's why people love those precious moments. If you look at, in fact, if you look at all of people's best moments in their life, moments of peace, moments of joy, moments of intense aliveness, there'll be moments of mindfulness. And we haven't even defined mindfulness yet, but that's how
I was going to say, how do you define it?
So the way I define it, I hate the definitions of mindfulness just because they don't mean anything to anyone who's not experienced it. Earlier, we talked about shifting from conceptual knowing to experiential knowing, right? Really knowing. If I could describe, just say you'd never tasted honey in your life. I could have a PhD in honey. I could tell you how it comes about, the process and the molecular structure, and I could kind of maybe describe roughly how it tasted to you. But until I actually handed you a jar of honey and said, taste this, you wouldn't know what honey was. And it's the same, we're back to the mantra of nobody ever got fit by listening to talk on fitness. And so when people trot out even the greatest definitions in the world of mindfulness, I just kind of shrink a little bit and think, but what does that mean to someone? If you Google mindfulness, probably the first result, probably the definition you get would probably be from a guy called John Kabat-Zinn, who's done incredible work and attempted to define it. And I'll get this wrong because I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it's something like mindfulness is paying attention in the moment, non-judgmentally, then maybe a little bit after that. And you read that and think, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
Am I doing that? Am I not doing that? How do I do that? So I'd say to someone this, right? And you can do this right now. I'd say, anybody listening to this, think about one moment in your life, any moment when you were 5 years old, or yesterday, where you felt either a deep peace just for a second. You have those moments where you just go, oh, wow, it's like where the world lives just for a second. Maybe you're lying on, I don't want to put too many ideas in here, but maybe you're lying on a beach, maybe you're out in nature somewhere, maybe you're swimming, maybe you're, it may involve something intensely alive. Maybe you're playing basketball and you forgot all your problems for a little while. As athletes will call that the flow state, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're skiing down a mountain. Maybe you're doing something intensely alive. It doesn't need to be sitting, chilling somewhere. Maybe you just noticed the joy in something. Maybe you noticed something, beautiful sunset on a holiday or something. And here's what I said to people. This is what most people don't realize, and I certainly didn't. If you zoom all the way in, if you zoom in really closely and look at that moment of peace, which may have lasted half a second or less, may have been super brief, but that moment where you felt intensely peaceful just for a second, before your mind came in and said, that was so good. That was beautiful. Before you taken the picture and put it on Instagram and told everyone what a great sunset it was, before you thought about what you're doing as you ski down the mountain, when you actually zoom in, that moment of peace, of intense aliveness, of joy, involves one huge thing happening. Your mind stops. There's no thinking. You can't feel truly peaceful and have a busy mind. You can't go into your back garden and look up at the sky and see the vast spaciousness and the little stars everywhere and the beautiful stillness. You can't really take that in and have a very busy mind. If you go out and you're thinking about your problems and your finances and your health and everything that's going on, yeah, there's a bit of stillness above and there's there's a huge space there and there's some stars above, but you're not really taking it in. That moment when you look up and go, wow, it's because your mind stopped. So to notice stillness outside, you need to be still inside.
But isn't that a bit ironic?
Your mind needs to be quiet.
Because it's called mindfulness. It's not called mind emptiness. So that's really, for me, a little bit ironic from what you're saying. I'm like, wait, but this is when my mind's empty.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people don't like that definition. I mean, mindfulness is single L. It's not meant to be kind of full mind, but yeah, it does kind of conjure up. So other teachers will use something like presence.
Yes.
But mindfulness is the translation of the stuff. But yeah, that's how I define it. I define it as the greatest moments in your life to me. The moments you'd love more of, the moments you'd love to have when you're You know, when you've got a really busy day at work and you're commuting and you're stuck in traffic and you get there and you've got meeting after meeting, you don't have time for lunch and you come home and then you've got to do this. Can you imagine just having a few moments of stillness in that day? Can you just having a few moments of space? Could you imagine if you could take some of those moments you feel on holiday and insert them into that work day, how much difference that would make?
That's what it's like a nice reset. It's like a nice reset in everything else that's happening.
Yeah. And we're all trying to do it, right? You look around, everyone's trying to do it. Everyone's trying to be more mindful, whether they're distracting themselves by having a few beers after work, or whether they're smoking something, or whether, you know, we're all trying to get out of our own heads, so to speak. We all know that when our mind is still, it feels great.
Yes.
And I'm talking about our mind being still and us still being alert and awake and alive. I'm not talking about falling below, I'm talking about anesthetizing ourselves. I'm not talking about drinking alcohol to a point where you get so sleepy that you forget all your problems anyway. I'm talking about transcending thought. We go rise above it. It's a very different experience. And in that state, you're alert and you're very awake and you're probably more alive than ever, even though your mind's still.
No, that sounds beautiful. As a final kind of thought, how do you see the relationship between mindfulness and emotional intelligence? What does that look like to you?
I think they're very closely linked. I think that the best leaders I've witnessed have either deliberately practiced some form of mindfulness, whether that's formal meditation, whether that's informal meditation during the day, whether that, I can tell you what that is in a second, whether that's yoga, whether they're just a naturally fairly mindful person. But for me, emotional intelligence and mindfulness, they have huge crossover. I think if you're I guess if I looked at the most emotionally intelligent leaders I can think of, they would have a strong sense of self-awareness. They'd have a strong sense of their own inner world. They'd not be swept away by emotion or the thoughts that are running through their head all day, every day. They'd have clarity to make great decisions. So they'd have enough stillness, they'd have enough space in their day that they can innovate, that they can create. Everybody knows, you know, when you have a great day, when you come up with a great idea, what do people say? Stephen Bartlett always says things like, "I have my greatest ideas in the shower when I'm out."
In the shower, yeah.
Yeah, why in the shower? Because your mind's still. You're not trying. There's a space, and in that space is where the creation, the true innovation comes. So, thought leaders, emotionally intelligent people, they understand that. They never underestimate the value of pausing regularly. They never underestimate the value of responding rather than reacting. And I think they also know that they need to practice this stuff. That's the other thing. I mean, if you look at some of the big businesses, people like, talking about business, people like Mark Benioff, Salesforce CEO, Oprah, insanely successful. You know, people like even Hugh Jackman, LeBron James, all these people, they're all practicing. Raheem Sterling, there's a bunch of people in sport and in every facet of life now who practice this because they realize that to truly take advantage of this, to truly build your emotional intelligence, I believe it has to be part of the pantheon of good things you do, ideally every day, right? Like brushing your teeth, like eating good food, like not drinking too much alcohol, like exercising your body. And if you can add kind of mindfulness in, maybe one thing I want to close on, I could give people something to practice before they go. If you can invite this stuff in, then it's really going to help you. Shall I just define that one thing? Because I kind of said formal meditation or informal meditation.
Yeah, go ahead.
So people think the meditators sit and they go to some quiet place or they go to some happy place or they manage to shut their mind off. And it's not that, right? It's not that at all. What you're building is a way of placing your attention somewhere other than thinking. So you ground your attention somewhere other than thought and you rest it there. And guess what? Your mind takes it back pretty quickly. But there's a very easy way for people to still their mind. And I'll invite anyone listening to do this right now, including you. All I want you to do, Tolu, is dial up your alertness now, becoming very alert. And I just want you to track the breath as it comes in and out of your body. Don't breathe any differently. But I just want you to be so alert that the next breath you catch is the nostrils. So you breathe it in, and I want you to notice all sensations, and I want you to ride the wave fully with your attention. So catch it. I'll say out loud. For me, there's kind of a coolness as I breathe in. It goes past the throat, the chest. I can feel my belly expanding. I can feel that touching my t-shirt. And as I breathe out, belly deflates. Air comes back up past the chest, quite subtle, but I can notice it. Past the throat, quite subtle, but I can notice it. Out through the nostrils, a little bit warmer as I breathe out. And just do one more of them, but really be with this one. Now, here's the huge thing, right? That people don't realize is huge until they practice it and invite it in their lives. People that struggle with overthinking, people that struggle that get anxious a lot of the time, people that suffer with depression, people that can't switch off, people that struggle to sleep, it's because their mind's often stuck in patterns. They've got no off switch for this thing, right? And what we just did there, one of the greatest mindfulness teachers in the world, a guy called Eckhart Tolle, who wrote a book called The Power of Now, and others, he says, anytime you truly watch your breath, you watch the sensation of your breath coming in and out of your body, you cannot be thinking at the same time. So it's impossible to think and do that. And if you think about how much suffering thinking causes you in your life, my guess would be it's in the 90%. Most people, the suffering from most people is generated by their mind. And what happens to us at life?
Yeah, so it's how we process it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if that's true, and we've just found a way of calming stilling our mind, and notice I didn't say to you stop thinking for 10 seconds to look, because if I'd said that, you wouldn't have been able to do it.
I wouldn't have been able to do it. Yeah.
Right. No one can. What I said was just become alone, watch your breath. Simple. And don't try hard to still your mind. Don't try and fix it anywhere. So the good news is we can actually, this is what I teach people. The bigger part of what I teach is not about teaching people to be meditators and sit formally for 10 minutes a day. It's about inviting this stuff into the rest of your day, the rest of your life. When we watch our breath, our minds are still, and that's one of the most beautiful things you can ever experience in your life is still mind. Just even if it's for a second, it's heaven. It's like the way the world lifts. All your problems disappear just for a second. And the tip I was going to give people is, you can do this anywhere. There's nothing people do in a formal period of meditation that they can't do in the rest of their lives. People don't realize that. So the tip I'd give is an easy one is next time you stop at a red light, whether you're in a car, whether you're driving the car, whether you're on a bike, whatever you're in taxi, when you see a red light, the red light stops your car, cannot stop your mind.
That's a nice trigger.
If you shift your attention to your breath, they call it conscious breathing. You could take 2 breaths sitting at the lights. You don't have to sort of exaggerate the out breath, but you can. 2 breaths. Now, the mind will then come in and say, that didn't do anything, didn't clear the inbox, did it? It's not make me sleep like a baby tonight. And the final thing I'll leave you with is, no, it didn't. But here's where the power of the cumulative effect comes in. And there's a guy, I forget his name, was a guy, I don't know if you remember it, he did a thing where he ate McDonald's every day for like 90 days or something. Remember?
Yeah. Supersize Me. Was it that guy?
Me.
Yeah,
that's it. So, if he had one McDonald's and gone to his doctor would have said, your liver's fine, your bloods are good. No problem. What he found was, as he ate them for 30, 60 or 90 days or however long he did it for, was the cumulative effect of that was real, was absolutely real. And it's the same for mindfulness. You're not going to practice mindfulness for half a day, 10 minutes, an hour, and it radically change your life. But there's a cumulative effect, and it's like fitness, right? You've got to build these things.
100%. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been very enlightening for me, and I've really enjoyed catching up with you. To know the real calm man that now is there. That was our calm leader before, but to see the substance behind that is great. Yeah, but honestly, thank you so much. Absolutely. No, my honest pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for listening. I will put the ways that you can contact and connect with Steve in the description of the episode. But thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you very much. Bye.